we are. And we are live. It is Sunday, June 21st, 2020. Jeffrey Berman is no longer the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, so life sucks for him. But Jay Clayton, who golfed with Trump and thought he was going to get the job, instead of being the boring head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, is not going to get the job. So life also sucks for him. Bill Barr has been humiliated. The president has been humiliated in Tulsa when K-pop fans and TikTok fans slopped up all the tickets and convinced the president he was going to have a giant crowd. He didn't. He just had a small crowd in a mostly or one-third empty arena full of COVID-19 carrying people. No fun anymore. No fun for Mr. Berman, no fun for Mr. Clayton, no fun for the president who went to Tulsa, and pobrecito, he couldn't even have a good rally. But in lieu of fun, we have our mystery guest, the Rick Wilson, not just any Rick Wilson. And I want to say, last time I did a mystery guest poll, who was going to be our mystery guest, Jonathan Rauch, came in dead last. And I felt bad about that. This time, the mystery guest came in first in the poll for who was going to be the mystery guest. Let me see, how did you do? 42% voted for the Rick Wilson. 28% voted for Jeffrey Berman, despite my saying on the show yesterday that no, I'm not. It wasn't Jeffrey Berman. Yeah. Fiona Hill was definitely the crowd favorite in the comments. Lots and lots of people said they really want to hear from Fiona, but she only got 24% of the predictive vote. And Ambassador John Bolton, who I think was probably the crowd least favorite, as well as the person people thought I was most unlikely to have, got only 5.5% of the vote. So Rick, welcome to In Lieu of Fun.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Kate. I appreciate you guys having me today.
Yeah, this is super fun.
Where are you? Are you locked down in Florida?
I am locked down in beautiful Tallahassee, Florida. I am up in my my AirSats podcasting studio upstairs in my home. So here we are.
And has this room of yours been rated by Room Rater?
They rated the downstairs view from my kitchen into my front hallway and my dining room, which I think it was an 8 of 10. So I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. I got a 0 out of 10, which put me in the company of Mitch McConnell. I'm the only non-Republican elected official who's gotten a 0 out of 10.
Yeah, but you're really proud of it.
Hey, you know what? You gotta ride with your strengths, and sometimes it's just being transgressive.
Yeah, they just said blue hostage video, 0 out of 10. I was, it made me happy.
I love it.
So I want to talk to you today about, I think, the thing that everybody wants to hear from Rick Wilson about, which is how you came to make all these cool ads and the Lincoln Project stuff. And by the way, I have an announcement to make about the Lincoln Project, which is at the request of one of Rick's partners in crime. I have authorized Rick and the Lincoln Project to use Baby Cannon to announce the release of Lincoln Project ads. So Baby Cannon has a new mission, and videos have been transferred. So take good care of her.
I will take good care of Baby Cannon, and Baby Cannon will be. We didn't get it all loaded up for the release of the video that's coming out very shortly, which I think will be a big one for the rest of the weekend. But we will be deploying baby cannon going forward.
And what is the video being released shortly?
Well, it's called Shrinking, and it's about Donald Trump's rallies, as particularly last night's disastrous meltdown in Tulsa, which, Reed Galen, one of our partners in the LP, is a former White House advance guy. And all of us at some point in our grassroots campaigning, worked in advance at some level. Reed was at the White House level. As he said yesterday, if we told the president we were going to pack an arena and put that much political capital by it, and barely a third of the people showed up, we would all be fired by the time Air Force One was off the ground. It was a terrible disaster for Trump last night, not only because it didn't frame the campaign message-wise, but because they did the fundamentally worst thing in politics. They overpromised and underdelivered. And, the idea that we're going to have those people outside and a giant rally in the outside area, and then a giant rally in the hall, and all this energy just fell apart. And then the speech turned out to be the usual sort of Trumpian farrago of self-aggrandizement, lies, weird confessions of truth, which shocked everybody. Like, I told them to slow down the testing.
Yeah, he seemed to think that was a good thing.
I got to wonder what Anthony Fauci and the rest were thinking, like, good God. I'm going to be dealing with FOIA for the rest of my life now. But it was definitely a bad evening for Trump, and his body language showed it in the hall, and his body language showed it when he got off the helicopter with the tie, loose. I mean, the guy looked like somebody who'd just been told his bookie found out where he's living. He just looked like he was beat down.
But do you think that this is going to matter for the 40% of his dedicated fundamentals? Because my general take, and I know this is not just my take, but and this is kind of a follow-up question that I want to talk to you about, which is who you're aiming at for these ads. Because
Sure.
You're not going to convince his base with these ads. Who are you aiming for?
We have 3 different columns of ads. We've been very open about this. The first column is the audience of one. He cannot look away. He cannot stop watching these ads. He cannot stop talking about them. He cannot stop talking about the work the Lincoln Project has done. They're attacking us jointly and individually. They can't stop obsessing. Every day that Donald Trump is watching an ad that we've made and talking about it and bitching about it and thinking about it is an ad is a day he's not working on a campaign that could reach more people. So we're very focused on ensuring that we bring the critique of Donald Trump, right to him, that we get right up in his grill all the time. We hammer away at him all the time. And, a couple of weeks ago, we ran an ad about Brad Parscale and how much money Parscale was making off the campaign. Well, 3 days later, Brad Parscale was layered. He was given a lateral promotion, basically, and they brought in other people. But that disrupted the Trump campaign's flow for a week. So those ads that directly address Donald Trump, as we've said, several times, those things are communicating with a guy who has a short attention span, a severe lack of self-discipline, and we're able to go in there and make him do things. We own him, as he would say, like a dog.
So that's audience number one.
That's audience number one. We're also talking,
But I want to say how exceptional that is. I also just in my view, in all of politics, when has there ever been a person that can be so psychologically disrupted because of their narcissism that that type of tactic would matter? I mean, I'm sure that there would never bother them, but I don't know, they'd just pay no attention or they'd be annoyed. But the fact that you can even have that column one is crazy to me.
And the other part of that is, in a lot of traditional campaigns, they lack the speed to deliver these messages that are disruptive to folks like him. So we have a much higher turnaround time inside our group. And without going into all the mojo of how we go so fast, we go really quickly. We had, the bunker ad up within 12 hours. We were going to have a piece up from last night that, we frankly thought it took a little bit longer than we expected. It's going to be up in 14 hours. But, we try to move quickly, and we try to catch the news cycles. And we know how much leverage we're getting off of this. The Trump campaign is now spending $400,000 a month in Washington, D.C. They're doing this because the news coverage told us that Trump was sick of seeing our ads, for which we paid a few $1,000s a week in DC, and wanted his own campaign ads running because his ego is that fragile. It's that delicate. And, he's not going to change. He can't change. He's psychologically unable to do anything but what he does. And so we're going to hammer away at him in that column. The second column, we're making the case out there to voters in this country, in the swing states and swing districts that we've identified through a big data modeling project, of the folks that have already started to walk away from the GOP because of Trump. There are people that these are groups, who they are generically. They're educated suburban Republican women. And in 2016, they held their breath. They held their breath and said, oh gosh, I can't vote for Hillary. I'll take a chance on Trump. By the end of 2018, they voted for the Democratic candidates for Congress and U.S. Senate for the most part. We know that they cannot abide Donald Trump's corruption and the cruelty of the man and the vile nature of him. And so they've already started to walk away. We're going to make sure we're communicating with those folks. There are a lot of independents out there who are still in the drift, who are leaning against him. We're going to make sure we capture those folks and educate those folks in these key swing states. And as we always say, this is a game of small numbers. This is a game where Donald Trump won the presidency in 3 states by 77,000 votes. He won Florida by less than 150,000 votes. So we understand how to target these folks. We've got all the tools in the toolbox that we used to have as a Republican consulting, in the Republican consulting world. And we've actually rebuilt them with greater precision. And we understand how to talk to those people. And we're having a really heartening and gratifying sense of impact on this race. We've been able to raise a significant amount of money in a very short span to put on television, to get in the fight, and to bank for electoral operations as we go forward. And we feel like we're punching very hard. And by the end of the campaign, everyone, all the campaigns switched to persuasion at the end. It's going to be hard for Trump to persuade people at the end to change if they're in the middle. He can't flip anyone from the other side. So we feel like we've got some advantages in that regard. And look, we give the Biden effort an ability to not have to be in the shit every day, to not have to be in the weeds every day. We can be the force that goes after the sky. And we feel like we're doing a job that people are recognizing. More and more people say we're doing a good job. So.
Yeah, and it is certainly the case that your ads are getting a lot more attention than Biden's own ads, because you're free to do a bunch of things that might be untoward for him to do.
Well, I've done this for 30 years, and I hear, and in every campaign, someone will say, we can't do negative ads. They're horrible. My wife hates them. My husband hates them. The people at my country club hate them. My business partners hate them. They're so horrible. And at the end of the day, it is always the negative ads that are decisive in a campaign.
And why is that?
Yeah, we asked the exact same question at the exact same time. And why is that? Like, and I guess my question was, and how do you determine it? So like, well, how did you?
There are a lot of human cognitive biases in elections and a lot of tribalism in elections. And the validation of negative information, psychologically speaking, is a powerful human motivator. It's easier to keep people in your tribe by having competitive information against the other guy than it is to keep them in your tribe by saying, these are the good things we stand for. And that may not be a great thing. That may not say great things about humanity, but that's the reality of politics.
So I want to ask about the meme of the day, which is that these TikTokers and K-pop fans
Right.
had a material impact on yesterday's Tulsa disaster. How much credit should they get?
They should get some credit for gaming the system. They should get more credit for now putting a fear into the Trump world that every number they get will be something that is unreliable. But the fault of the campaign goes beyond the K-pop kids. They would have let people in to that arena until it was filled to the rafters if there were people outside. The Secret Service would have been wanting people till the last second if there had been people outside. And it says something profound, I think, about the Trump campaign on two big levels. One, the enthusiasm level that Trump has always presumed to exist in his base in one of the most red states in the country. Look, Oklahoma is an R+28 state. It is as intensely Republican as you could ask for. There is no doubt who will win Oklahoma. But the fact that they couldn't get 6,000 people, or couldn't get more than 6,000 people into that arena last night after weeks and weeks of hype says a lot about the enthusiasm gap. It also says something about the toolbox that Brad Parscale claims to have built for Trump. Parscale claims they built this Facebook mechanism, this Death Star, he calls it, of media and Facebook outreach and digital campaign tools that can get their voters out, get their people motivated, and get them off to the ballot box and to events for Trump. Well, it's the first rally after the big COVID crisis. There should have been a lot of pent-up demand. They were bragging for a week. They had 1 million people who asked to come. And while the K-pop kids did a great and funny prank, the vacuum on the Republican side that existed, that they couldn't get more than 6,000 people in a 19,000 person arena with weeks of notice and with free tickets and everything else, is stunning. It is. And I can tell you, we've heard from people near the campaign and people in the White House in the last 24 hours. I spoke to someone last night, the minute they got off Air Force One, who told me this was a grim ride home. This is.
Why do they talk to you?
Why?
Yeah, like I mean,
because at the end of this, they want to be considered to be good Germans.
Yes.
I see. And do you maintain cordial relations with them?
I do.
What's your relationship with the good Germans in the White House?
Very few in the White House itself, to be perfectly blunt. But we have people that whisper to us inside the White House, and it's intriguing. Their psychology is intriguing. And I would say this: in 2017, their psychology was, we've got this. It's going to be great. He's going to learn. We can teach him. He'll become presidential. It's going to be fine. Don't worry. You're all going to be wrong because he's going to learn the job. Well, that worked out really poorly. And in 18, it was, well, I'm just trying to do the right thing and steer the ship as much as I can and hope for the best. And maybe I can have some positive influence here or there at the margins. Now it's like, please don't kill me when this is over. Now, as far as elected officials go, we've seen a really interesting arc there. And I think, all of us in the LP, Steve and John and Reed and myself, we've had a lot of different relationships across a very diverse group of elected officials. And one group that just lives in fear of Trump, those people in 17, we talked all the time. They were always like, I hate him. It's terrible. This is awful. I want to do this. I want to come out against him. I can't stand this. It's un-American. In 18, those guys really dropped off because they just got scared. There was a snitch culture that developed inside the Congress where
the Will-Hurd Klingover effect, right?
Yeah. And they were afraid they were going to get busted and Trump would tweet about them. FOMT is my rule, fear of mean tweets. And now, that number of folks in Congress that I talked to, a lot of those people got blown out in 2018 because they were in a quandary. If they embraced Trump, the voters in their moderate districts would blow them out. if they oppose Trump, the Republicans in their district would say, nope, not going to vote for you. It's Trump or nothing. And so the ones that are left, most of them either fall into two categories, fear or opportunism. The opportunists are the Matt Gaetzes, the Devin Nunes's, those people that are, performatively using their support of Trump to raise money and to try to get things passed, and and in the Senate, it's a different pool. There's a different chemistry in the Senate. Those folks, most of them want to run for president. Josh Hawley and Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton, they all are convinced they're going to be president in 2024. They're all convinced of it. And so they want to try to narrowly navigate this pathway of not being considered Trumpist, and keeping lines of communications open with people who aren't, and trying to keep the Trump base on stream at the same time.
So let's get back to this kind of idea. Let's get back to this kind of idea about you having these three columns, right? Or these three categories. And so there's you're aiming them at Trump, you're aiming them at people whose votes might change. I would imagine that the third category is that you're aiming at people who okay, you might change their vote, but you're going to also give them money, is you basically feel is that part of your consideration? Is it about fundraising at all?
Not really, no. I mean, the fundraising work that we're doing is about two big things. One is about the defeat of Donald Trump, which we are wholly committed to. That's our central mission, bar none. But we're also committed to defeating Trumpism. And we want to make sure that we are out in play in Senate and now in some House races where folks who have enabled the behavior of this president, folks who have enabled the lawlessness, the corruption, the complete subversion of the rule of law, we're going to go after those people in some of these key states and some of these key races, because they will continue Donald Trump's power. They will enable him. And we started focusing on some of the Senate stuff in December when it looked like Bernie Sanders might be the nominee. And Donald Trump's campaign was working very hard to make Bernie Sanders the nominee. We fought against that successfully. And we thought, okay, we'll probably play in a couple of races. We'll probably play in Colorado and Arizona. Those are real races. Probably play in Maine. That's a real race. Well, now the Senate map keeps opening up for us. The Senate map's not getting any better for Republicans. It's getting better for Democrats all over the place. 6 weeks ago, Joni Ernst was not a swing seat, a tough race. Now, Joni Ernst is feeling a lot of pressure. 6 weeks ago, Lindsey Graham losing the South Carolina Senate race was absurd. Now, Lindsey Graham's numbers, ironically, with Republicans are weak enough to where if we have a big day in November, Lindsey Graham could get blown out. Mitch McConnell is in an R+30 state. Why do we advertise against Mitch McConnell? Because we understand that Mitch McConnell cannot resist protecting his own interests. And so he's pulling money out of Arizona, Colorado, Maine, and elsewhere to go back into Kentucky. And that decision was an arbitrage decision. We knew we could spend a certain amount of money, and roughly call it $500,000. And he pulled $11 million out of other campaigns because of that.
So what's the total budget that you guys are working with this cycle?
$35 million is our basic budget. We believe we will probably exceed that given our current rate. We've had a strong fundraising quarter, and our momentum on the fundraising has continued dramatically. And we're banking an awful lot of money right now for the fall that we believe will be very effective in the swing states we want to play in.
And when you say $35 million is the base and you're having strong fundraising quarters, are you raising mainly money from the general public, or is this being principally funded by a small number of high value donors?
The bulk of our fundraising has been individuals. The average gift is, I think, 40. I think we're going to report the average gift this quarter is $41.
So it's Bernie
And
Sanders level small bore.
yeah, it is a small thing. Now we do have some large donors. We'll be reporting this quarter, some impressively large numbers, and those numbers are growing quickly. And the reason that they're growing is that we're putting lead on the target. We're out there
Right.
delivering some of the things that Democratic super PACs have not been able to do.
So let's talk about that.
Sure.
Why? I mean, you have this kind of bad boy persona where, you know, and
I've never heard
you,
that about you, Rick. Never.
I've heard you say, no, but I've heard you say, you know, why don't Democrats listen to people like me? We've kicked their ass for years and years and years.
Yeah.
I know, you know, and I'm pretty sympathetic to that, frankly. And I think as you guys have gotten this started, you've shown that you're capable of putting lead on the target in ways that a lot of Democratic PACs are not able to do, including ones that have enough distance from the Biden campaign that they wouldn't be sullying it. And you're not swift boating anybody. These ads are not false information. Now, granted, to keep with the targeting metaphor, this is a target-rich environment, the president.
Yes.
And he paints new targets for you every day. But why are you guys so much better at this than the Democrats who are basically fighting the same fight?
Part of it is, and I'm not going to go into the secret sauce part of it. We have a creative partnership inside this group that is extraordinary, like I've never experienced in my career. And we have the latitude and the speed and the determination to go quickly and to influence the dialogue every day. We have a lot of experience between us. I think it's like 120 years of experience between us, which is pretty meaningful. And we've all been to the rodeo at races from the presidency down to dog catcher. And we felt like in the course of this, of long careers, all of us honed down to a fairly fine point what wins elections. And we've all got different angles in terms of our skill sets. But if you bolt it down to the one last big determinative point, it's that we don't give a shit what you think about us. You can say whatever you want, call us names, attack us. They're going to do it anyway. We're going to go in and pick the attack that's going to do the maximum damage to the target that day. We're going to go after this guy and his campaign every day in a way that doesn't worry about externalities. Somebody said something very funny today. A Democratic consultant said, you know, they did that ad last week with Trump having trouble going down the ramp. And he said, Democrats would have spent a day and a half worrying if somebody would be offended that we showed someone who couldn't walk down a ramp. All we care about is getting the job done. We are reductionist in every way when it comes to that stuff. So we don't really spend a lot of time worrying about, you know, the way Democrats tend to do their ads. And I mean this with tough love. They will go and spend a day worrying about whether every frame looks like a Benetton ad. They will spend a day worrying that they've checked every demographic box on the ad, and we just don't care. We're going to go after it. We're going to go after the target. We're also going to do things that are speaking to, not only the audience of one, but to the demographic set that we have. We're driven by those numbers. We don't just fire away randomly, or think that every ad has to look, an ad in Alabama does not have to look like an ad in California for us. We don't approach politics in the same way.
It's also funny to hear you talking about an ad in California versus an ad in Alabama, because I just think of ads so much as being about the internet now that it just strikes me as the geographic placement of them is just not as important.
I don't we will never run ads digitally or otherwise. I mean, the earned media may take them there. We'll never run ads digitally or otherwise at the presidential level in New York or California or Alabama,
right,
or Arkansas. I know how those states are going to vote. It doesn't matter. This is an electoral college game. This is another thing Democrats at the national level have had so much trouble with for so long. The whole Hillary won by 3 million votes. Who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. The ball game, whether you love it or hate it, is the Electoral College. It is the only ball game. There is no other rule set involved. It's just the Electoral College. And
I agree with that so much. Sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay.
I'm right there with you.
I always hear Democrats saying things like, the youth vote will be with us. Okay. Well, you know where the youth vote is located in the Democratic voter pool? 18% of the 18 to 25 voters in the whole country are in California for the Democrats. Okay. California, you won California. Okay, great. That's what you do. This idea that they try to punch together this mosaic in their heads that a national race matters, it doesn't matter. Cherry picking and menu picking, column A, column B, is how an Electoral College race is won. It's how Trump won last time around. They didn't go out and try to swing big states. They went out and tried to steal a few votes here and there, and then 77,000 votes. That's it.
We have a question from Donick Thomas. You need to unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi. I was just, wondering who the bright lights are in the Republican Party currently that we should perhaps back and follow. I mean, because it just seems like such a shit show right now.
You'll have to see what the world looks like after November 3rd.
Yeah.
Because right now, as I like to say, this is a party of profiles in chicken shit. These are people who do not. Other than Mitt Romney, who does not want to run for president again, he's going to be in his late 70s by that point, or mid 70s by that point. The party is full of people who try to have it both ways. Ben Sass says, I strongly despise what the president said about, but when there's a but in a giant ethical condemnation, it's not a real condemnation. When there's a Marco kind of approach to, I'll tweet out a Bible verse as a sort of elliptical criticism of the president. Sorry, doesn't work. Josh Hawley and Tom Cotton think that they're going to run as nationalist populists in the Trumpian mold and just sand off the rough edges. Again, I don't think that works. I don't think it works politically because Trumpism, as we've seen, does not scale.
Trump's popularity is a function of the rough edges in
right.
the group, among the group of people that like him. It's the rough edges that are energizing them.
That is very true, Ben, and they enjoy the transgressive nature of Trump. But they enjoy that transgressive nature in part because the guy that they voted for and they support is the guy they saw on TV for 15 years, the reality TV star, where they presumed that the rough and tumble part of him came along with the thing they saw on television. They thought he's a great negotiator, he's wealthy, he's accomplished, he's smart, he's got a good judgment about people. And none of those things were ever real. Those were always right. a product of reading a teleprompter. But there's a part of the Republican Party that has become, that for years was conditioned by Fox News. And they used to say, we just want a fair hearing of our views. We want to, Republican ideas are so great that if people hear them, they'll love them. No, they didn't really want that. They wanted a silo. They wanted their own media bubble, and they've created it. So the transgression of Trump, the cruelty, the racist stuff, the ethnic animus, all these things, they like that. That's what they think is leadership. And they're going to continue, I think, to hold to that, even as the party shrinks around them. And those guys who want to run in the future are very much trying to do the same thing.
So what's your long-term objective? Is the game for you to beat the heck out of the current Republican Party so that a reasonable one can rise like a phoenix from its ashes? Or is your game to be the bad boy right of the Democratic Party?
Well, there's no game underneath all this.
No, I mean,
really
John,
are
I don't mean game in a disparaging way.
I know, I
mean,
understand.
I mean, like,
We're trying to beat Donald
objective.
Trump. I mean, we really do legitimately view that we burned our boats with the old Republican Party. There's no going back for us. Okay?
As a result, your troops were well motivated.
You know, they've gone after us in ways that are both large and small. And, you know, all the tools that they've got to try to stop the LP and stop us individually and severally or jointly are being deployed. That's okay. They're allowed to do that. We're going to keep hammering away at him because we think he is a singular risk for this country, for the Constitution, for the rule of law, for our institutions, all these things that we legitimately believe were part of being a conservative. And I think the Republican brand has been very much poisoned by Donald Trump. There's going to be a generation plus of people who associate the GOP with lawlessness, corruption, and cruelty. I don't think that is a model by which you can be a national governing party in the way the country looks 10, 20 years from now. It's not there. Do I think that there is a role in this country for a center-right, constitutionally oriented party that believes in the rule of law, individual liberty, personal freedom, you know, fiscal discipline? Absolutely. I think it's right there. And a lot of the people that would support that party are the people the GOP managed to get from the Democrats for generations, where they brought over male Democratic voters because of national security. They brought over male Democratic voters because of gun control. They brought over male Democratic voters because the idea that they were going to try to make sure that the economy was prosperous. So all those things are, you know, November 3rd, we have two big metrics in our head. November 3rd, Inauguration Day. We don't think that if this is a close race, we don't want it to be close, we want to crush this guy. We want to make it so bad that it doesn't matter if they cheat. We want to crush them so bad it doesn't matter if they do every trick in the book voter suppression wise. But if it's a close race, we suspect even if he loses, he'll fight this thing to the last minute. He's a gambler. He's a day trader. He will always try to throw some BS at the wall and try to make it work for himself. So, you know, we're ready to fight this until Joe Biden puts his hand on that Bible. And after that, we got to see. It's terra incognita between now and that moment.
I think that's it's like everything you said, I completely understand. And actually, we have a great question from Patrick, who's going to ask you about Biden in a second. But before we do, I just kind of I have a question, which is like hearing you talk about this. It seems like what you're saying, what you're describing is like, listen, Republicans have principles. These are the principles of like Republicanism. But then I'm also hearing kind of like, but we're willing to kind of basically abandon principles and just go for outcomes. And we're solely focused on this outcome, which is that there is this tyrant that has like done this thing and like we have to defeat him. And then you kind of go to the like kind of describing Democrats, which I don't think is wrong at all, of being kind of like, well, we have to fit everyone under this big tent and have everyone kind of feel. But that comes like that. Well, I don't know whether you would characterize it as like kind of being adherent to principles, but comes at the cost of maybe but yeah.
See, I don't think that's really where we're at because Trump has abandoned every principle of republicanism. He doesn't believe in the rule of law. He believes in unlimited executive power. He believes in using the power of government to aggrandize himself. He is lavishly corrupt. None of the things that Republicans claim to believe that Donald Trump would deliver for them, other than the sort of judicial fetishism, and that's been a sort of bad week for them in that regard. Other than that, you know, we have blown out the budget even before COVID. We have blown out the budget spending and debt wise. We have weakened America in the world under Donald Trump's leadership, such as it is. All those things that were Republican values are not present in Trump or Trumpism or this administration. So we don't feel like it's at variance with our values as conservatives to go after him, because I think of him as a statist and a leaning. I mean, he is at least authoritarian adjacent. And I believe that the desire he has to exercise executive power in an unbounded way, and the degree to which he has been abetted in that exercise of executive power by Bill Barr, those things are, to me, a very strict concern as a conservative. And I will take time in the wilderness with Joe Biden as president rather than the risk that he poses to the country going forward.
Yeah, I think the better way of maybe saying it is that I really admire the pragmatism of the Lincoln Project, and that you recognize, like, listen, this is where the battle's being fought. We can't ignore where the battle's being fought, and like just hope to like let this whole thing ride. It's exactly as you said. He's just perverted everything, so we have to bring that perversion back to him. And I think that's a really, really smart point. Patrick, you have a question about Biden, and the floor is yours. You just have to unmute yourself.
Unmute, Patrick.
I feel bad. He was unmuted before, but now he has.
Yeah. So Patrick, while you're dealing with your audio, Gerald L has a different question. Gerald, the floor is yours.
Thanks. This is a great discussion. Thanks so much. I actually think that last night was the greatest humiliation since Obama made fun of him at the correspondence dinner. I think this was really bad. And Rick, you started to say that the ride home was grim last night for Trump. Was there more that your source told you?
Yes. This is, and I'm going to obviously sanitize this a little bit. The knives got out on the plane almost immediately. The concern on Brad's camp was that Jared and Ivanka were talking to reporters while the plane was still in the air. Jared and Ivanka were back. They were picking up on the flight. Jared and Ivanka were already shitting Brad out to reporters by the time they got home. Like, he's not our guy when he has in fact been their guy all along. So, but then again, loyalty and Jared and Ivanka are not phrases that I would put in the same box. And obviously, look, Donald Trump today has tweeted, I think, once. He is in the bunker today, metaphorically at least. And the results of last night set off a pattern that we've seen before. Donald Trump has already decided to fire Brad Parscale in his head. What he's going to do today is call his friends, Tom Barack and Chris Ruddy and all these other people. He's going to get on the phone with them and say, do you think he's doing a good job or a bad job? He's going to validate this decision with his buddies. And so I think the time Brad has left is rapidly diminishing.
Patrick, this is your chance.
Okay. First of all, let me say to the folks at the Lincoln Project, just a point before I ask my question. 35 years in the investment banking business, I was not allowed to make political contributions. This year, my wife and I, for the first time, have made our first political contribution to the Lincoln Project because we absolutely believe in what you all are doing and how terrible our current situation is. So that having been said, Rick, I love what you're doing. Who, in your opinion, is the best choice for Biden's VP? Or is it unimportant since in our minds, it's fundamentally a binary choice?
Well, this election is a referendum on Donald Trump. As long as it stays a referendum on Donald Trump, the VP selection is a marginal effect. I think that there are plenty of opportunities for Joe Biden. And look, if he had not made the commitment on the front end to pick a female VP, we'd have a wider pathway in some cases. But he's got a number of excellent options right now who may be top of the field in terms of their ability to move people in the race and their ability to meet the one test a VP must have. The one thing a vice president must do when they stand on that stage next to him at the convention, American voters have to look at that person and say, she's ready to be president right now, day one. That is always the sort of underpinning test of any VP. I think we're going to end up, I think Harris is right now in the lead pretty significantly in terms of the betting pool on this. I think we may end up with her. I think that's a great thing. She has shown a good degree of talent in debates. She came across very powerfully in a couple of debates, almost took Joe Biden out of the box. She's not perfect in terms of her performance yet, but I think she'd be a great asset. I think having an African-American woman on the ticket with a statewide background is a strong signal, but it's got to be somebody that looks like they're going to be ready to do that job day one. And some experience is definitely helpful in that. I think she's in the front of the pack right now. Warren is up in the betting a little bit lately. I don't think she brings you anything you don't already have. And I don't think she does much more for the ticket than Harris would do in any meaningful way. Stacey Abrams was a hot flavor for a while there. I think she worked a little too hard to become VP, which often ends up making it not work out as well. So look, I think there are a lot of good options. I'm not in a position to pick the candidate necessarily. I mean, if I had somebody on paper, it would be a female Democratic veteran who had been a statewide official and was an American citizen. Unfortunately, the one character who fits that wasn't born in the U.S.
But we can get real close though. Leave out the veteran part and replace it with public health official, and you've described the governor of New Mexico.
You might see that happen. Especially because then you end up with a certain number of other ethnic chemistry equations that begin to work out. And people would be surprised to learn that the Hispanic population in some of the swing states is growing so rapidly that campaigns haven't caught up with it. Georgia has an enormous and rapidly expanding Hispanic population, primarily Mexican Americans. North Carolina, enormous numbers of folks from Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and a growing number of Mexicans also. Florida, Venezuelans, Puerto Ricans who are American citizens, and the Democrats, if they don't get their shit together and get Puerto Rican voters in Florida registered and turned out to vote, they're out of their damn minds. They don't like Donald Trump. But in 2016, Hillary's campaign was like, why, yes, Minister Potemkin, this village looks lovely. And nothing happened. So a lot of opportunity in all those cases.
Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So my question is given what we know about Trumpism and the Trump campaign, is there any likelihood at all that they're going to be able to tack? I mean, I personally love the fact that the Lincoln Project makes them chase every bright, shiny object, as evidenced by last night. But right. Strategically, if you were running their campaign, what would you do to help them pivot?
Well, I think that the hypothetical, Elizabeth, is great, but there is no way to make Donald Trump change. There is no different iteration of Donald Trump. The defining characteristic of this guy is that he has no attention span and no intellectual underpinning to what he wants at that moment. It's all impulse, it's all ego, it's all this sort of twitch reflex of gimme, gimme, gimme. And the discipline of campaigning makes or breaks a national candidate. George Herbert Walker Bush wanted to be reelected, and I worked for him. I was a young appointee in the Bush administration. He wanted to be reelected on the credit of pushing Saddam out of Kuwait, winning the Cold War, and there just wasn't a discipline in the campaign to break out and do the stuff he needed to do. Bill Clinton, in the re-election campaign, masterful, even in the face of crisis, kept to his message, stuck to his knitting, did the work. George W. Bush, even though the war was a little bit off kilter, even by 2004, he had the discipline to do the work in the campaign. Barack Obama, same thing. Donald Trump lacks that discipline. He lacks that focus. And so I think it's almost impossible for the campaign to do anything to change him. And that's why they are fundamentally vulnerable outside to influences like the Lincoln Project, especially with people who can move as fast who can move faster than they can.
So can we talk a little bit about the TikTok and the whatchamacallit? What's the K-pop? Yeah.
Before you do, Kate,
yeah,
just a message to everybody in the audience who is using the raised hand thing. That's not how we do things on In Lieu of Fun, because we've had Zoom bombing issues, and we try to keep this open to everybody. So if you have a question, instead of raising your hand, flag it for us in the Q&A. Just tell us the subject you want to ask about, and we will try to come to you. We've got a lot of questions in there, but please don't use the raised hand. Kate, sorry.
Yeah, no, totally fine. Thank you for doing that. So what I was just going to say was that you have the K-pop and the TikTok stuff. And to harken back to the terminology of the Nixon era, I feel like it's decentralized rat fucking versus like the Lincoln Project's centralized rat fucking, which is just to say that there is just, you're kind of like trying to like there is a beauty in kind of the TikTok movement. I'm just kind of curious what you think about that.
Yeah, you should look at the TikTok people as sort of like the Yugoslavian partisans in World War II. I will give you a little insight into the Lincoln Project. We are 4 of the biggest World War II history nerds you will ever meet. It's terrifying how much of the weeds we could get.
So for those who don't know, who are the 4 of you?
The 4 of us are Steve Schmidt, John Weaver, myself, and Reed Galen. Stuart Stevens has joined our pirate ship just recently as another member of the senior echelon of the thing. Jennifer Horn, Mike Madrid, Ron Steslow, some other folks who've been around a lot of GOP campaigns are also on board. But the 4 of us have managed to build, like we call it the pirate ship for a reason. We are. We move fast, we hit hard. We're not going to get in a war with the big Navy. We're going to get in the war by blowing up their supply lines. But the TikTokers, they are like the Yugoslavian partisans. They are mobile, they are fast, they are chaotic. And there are probably 75 different factions inside of them at any given moment. They did something that exploited the Trump's obsession with collecting data. And they managed to exploit the greed of the Trump team for data. Because they want data so much, they made the friction of applying for those tickets very minimal. And that minimal friction led to few security restrictions on the situation. So we ended up in a moment where they rounded up all those tickets. But as I've said, the campaign, even though those tickets were all out there, the campaign couldn't get 19,000 people. They couldn't move 19,000 voters. And they supposedly have this Death Star, this machine, this Facebook, this wonderful Facebook enterprise where they can manipulate people, drive their vote, push them to the polls, push them out to do things. And they couldn't. So it really speaks to that moment.
John Bordeaux, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I have a question that is literally coming from left field. As the GOP is able to make these villains out of people like AOC and the squad, I'm curious why Project Lincoln doesn't also consider that some of the lunacy on the far left that may also end up helping the GOP or Trump. And what comes to mind immediately is we suddenly have a primary in Kentucky for the Democratic Senate.
Yes. Well, I mean, one of the things that we were definitely trying to avoid in the presidential primary and did some work with was Bernie. I mean, we thought, and all 4 of us, all of us around the table said, who do we want? If we're Trump, who do you want to run against? You want to run against Bernie. You want to run against Bernie because it becomes a choice, not a referendum. You wanted to make it a referendum. So the idea that and the Trump campaign was working very hard to pick Bernie as their opponent because they knew that was one of their only pathways to having a choice race, not a referendum. The situation in Kentucky, if you did the detective work, I promise you'll find that the NRSC or some allied group is pushing Booker in Kentucky because they know that a Bernie-style progressive in an R+30 state cannot win. They are concerned that McGrath's bio as a veteran is problematic, and so we don't have the bandwidth and resources to go down the ballot to a lot of those things. But we believe that one of the things we all know from experience, and I've written 2 books now, in part, that outline why the Democrats in swing states, why did Republicans start winning in Florida back in the 90s? It wasn't because we picked every single person as a Trumpian Tea Party far right Christian conservative. We picked and chose people in different areas that fit the districts. So maybe in Miami, you were going to have Republicans who were much more conservative on foreign policy than they were on social policy. Or in the Panhandle, you were going to have guys that were to the right of the Pakistani Northwest Frontier provinces. But there was a spectrum of choice there. The Democrats sometimes end up with candidates who fit a national ideological profile, and they can't win in moderate states. So that's sort of the short answer of that.
David Benger, unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Wilson and the Lincoln Project, for all the work you are doing and your time this afternoon. My question is as follows. So there were 2 big liberal wins at the Supreme Court this week, DACA and Title VII. And I wonder if you think that there's a substantial population of voters in the swing states who say, I despise Trump and everything he stands for, but a conservative judiciary is very important to me. I'm going to vote Republican no matter what. Is there a group who saw those losses this week and are now saying, well, he hasn't even really delivered ultimately on the end result of what I wanted from conservative judges, who may swing their vote based on that?
I don't think we have an answer on that completely yet. I do think there's been some bitterness among social conservatives this week that I've picked up on, particularly about Gorsuch. They already consider Roberts to be a traitor, rhino, cuck, shill, Soros, deep state operative. But I have said this to Democrats, and I mean this in a completely serious, non-facetious way. Democrats should pray every morning for the health of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because Republicans have grown to fetishize the judiciary in a way that it is one of the sole motivators of the Republican base now. And if they believe that that is the issue of the election, it will change the chemistry. It will cause a differing set of motivations at the Republican base that I don't think would be a positive for the Democrats.
It's a very interesting point. I mean, I am sufficiently fond of Justice Ginsburg that I have trouble thinking about that in cold-blooded terms. But I'm certain you're right, and I'm also certain that the point is ironically a bit of a chimera, because if Biden were to win, Justice Ginsburg would certainly step down over the 4 years of his tenure. And so in no sense is her seat not at stake. And so, the Republican voter who would be who's energized and whose heart goes pitter patter every time she gets hospitalized for an infection isn't merely sort of rubbing their hands together like a fly on shit. They're also being silly because Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat on the Supreme Court is at stake in this election, full stop. There is no way the next president, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, isn't going to get to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's 87,
yep.
And she's in frail health and has cancer. I mean, I'm like, come on.
Yep.
Yeah, one of the worst cancers, one of the most incurable cancers.
Right, and God bless, she's managed to keep it together, and that is a miracle in and of itself. But I mean, look, both Thomas and Ginsburg are reaching the end of the actuarial tables for this equation. And as cold as that sounds, those two races, I mean, look, if Clarence Thomas passed today, you know, replacing a conservative with a conservative doesn't move the base as much, but taking a liberal seat moves the Republican base.
All right, we've got to wrap up, but I want to leave you with one open-ended question, which is, if you have a message, a simple message to Democrats right now, what is it?
Never take your foot off the gas. The only thing you can never get back in a campaign is the day you're in. Spend every fucking dime you have, die broke. I mean, make sure you have enough money in the bank to pay your campaign staff, but spend the money you've got, go into the swing states. It's only about the swing states. And in those swing states, it's really, in this whole country, only about 25 suburban counties surrounding the cities in those swing states. Stay on target. Don't buy your own bullshit. Don't drink your own Kool-Aid. Make sure you're cross-checking all your vendors who tell you things like, we've got all the Hispanic outreach done. Stay on digital. Earn media accounts every day. Never believe a fucking word that Trump says. Don't let him guilt you into anything. He's always acting in bad faith, and kick his ass until he's down.
Oh, just those things. Just those
Sorry.
things.
That was poetic, man.
That was incredible.
I'm gonna grab a little excerpt of that.
I'm putting that in a t-shirt.
Over to you.
It's going to be a really big t-shirt.
Rick Wilson, thank you much for joining us
Thanks,
today.
Ben. Thanks, Kate. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me. Happy Father's Day.
Yeah, happy Father's Day.
You too. So for all of you who are here because you're Rick Wilson fans, you've never seen In Lieu of Fun before, we do this every day, 7 days a week. This is the 86th or 87th episode of In Lieu of Fun. As long as there is lockdown at 5 o'clock Eastern time, Kate and I will be here with somebody interesting to have a conversation with, and you should join us. We usually announce the person in advance, only on Sundays, which is our mystery guest time. Do we not do that? And so if you watch our Twitter feeds or the @In Lieu of Fun show Twitter feed, we'll always tell you who the guest is going to be and give you the link to the YouTube and the Zoom. So come back and have a drink with us tomorrow. Kate, do we know who our guest is tomorrow?
No, we don't. It's probably either Jonathan Zittrain or somebody else. So
all right, so we're going to have either Jonathan Zittrain or somebody else tomorrow. As you can see, we got no producers, we've got no bookers. We just kind of do it ourselves. The show is planned on the show. So please come back and play with us sometime. And until then, Kate, what do we say?
We don't have fun anymore. So in lieu of fun, you can come hang out with us and the Allen Ginsberg of rat fucking.
Yeah. Until then, in lieu of fun, throw them down, kick them, keep your eye on the target, and spend all your money. See you tomorrow.